Madam Chair, we are now live.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moya. This is the, Julie, do you want me to read the whole instructions for public participation, even though they probably know them already?
Madam Chair, yes, if you don't mind, just kind of reading through the beginning
Not
of the
at all.
script.
Thank you. So we have instructions for public participation for this land use planning and zoning committee meeting. Written comments. The committee will take written comments, which has already been done. Virtual live comments. To provide real-time verbal public comment over Zoom, participants must sign up for public comment by 1 p.m. So that has been taken care of. The participants must sign up for public comment with the Zoom username or phone number that they will be entering the Zoom meeting with.
Madam Chair?
Pass over that.
Madam Chair, if you have your script there, I think those would be the more pertinent instructions than the ones that are on the agenda. You have your meeting script.
I do not have my meeting script.
If you have your iPad available near you, they should be in the iPad under the meeting documents.
I do indeed. Give me just a second. Script, got it. Thank you, Julian. Sorry, I was running late on another meeting and ran a little behind on studying stuff. So I call this meeting to order. This is the Land Use Planning and Zoning Committee of the City Council. All committee members are present today via Zoom. This is a remote online meeting where all participants will be on a video or audio conference. We are holding this meeting remotely so that everyone can participate safely while we are conducting business under a public health emergency. We appreciate your patience as LUPS meetings are conducted this way. Members of the public will be able to address the committee if they have signed up for live public comment per the rules published on the agenda and on our website Friday. Speakers will be moved into the meeting room 2 at a time. They will remain muted with their camera off until they are called upon to speak, at which point they can turn on their camera, unmute themselves, and will have 2 minutes to provide comments to the committee. After that, they will again be muted and return to be an attendee of the Zoom webinar. Written comments were also received and distributed to the committee members in advance of the meeting. Members of the public, city staff, and the media have the ability to view this meeting live through YouTube and Zoom webinar. The live stream can be accessed from most smartphones, tablets, or computers. For those watching on the live stream, thank you for joining us. We will start with public comment. Hello to those joining us to provide public comment. If you are watching the YouTube live feed for this meeting, please mute or turn it off at this time. And here are the public comment ground rules. Comments are to be addressed to the committee members only. Please keep your comments germane to the topics on the agenda. Any disruptive conduct or non-germane commentary will result in removal from the Zoom webinar. There will be a 2-minute time limit. The timer will start once you begin speaking. Then the Zoom moderator, Mr. Moya, will let you know when your time is up. Mr. Moya, would you please call the name of the first speaker?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our first speaker will be Dan Regan, followed by Dr. Joe Valles. Mr. Regan, please feel free to turn your video, unmute yourself, and your 2 minutes will begin when you start speaking.
How do I get video up?
Thank
you.
The bottom, there you go.
Thank you. Madam Chair and members, I am representing the Neighborhood Association as its president, the Knapp Heights, and District 4 Coalition as a chair of their Zoning Development Committee. I am going to request that I be given 3 minutes because that's where my comments are, and I do not want to run through them like a machine gun. Will that be possible?
Mr. Moya, how many speakers do we have?
Madam Chair, we have 9 speakers signed up to speak.
Mr. Regan, please go ahead with your time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
We will time you with that and ask you to.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair and LUPS members, I'm Dan Regan, President of Knapp Heights Neighborhood Association and District 4 Coalition's Zoning and Development Committee. My home is about 7 miles away from the San Antonio Oxbow. The northeast corner of our District 4 Coalition is a bit more than 12 miles from the Oxbow. So why am I speaking at the LUPS meeting today? Because what happens to the Oxbow is important to us on the east side of the Rio also. And R20-134 has a direct impact on the health of the Oxbow. The Oxbow is the largest wetlands connected to the Rio Grande in New Mexico. It is one of the most diverse wetlands in the whole state. It is home to 575 species who call it either permanent their home or one of their more important migratory way stations. Surely you are all aware of the current drought's impact on the river. A recent journal article even spelled out the results of a completely dry river through our area. And we all saw the consternation that occurred when hundreds of birds just fell over dead in at least 3 areas of our state in August and September last year. Actual cause is still undetermined beyond some informed guesses. The bottom line is that the Oxbow is and will be under serious stressors going forward. R2134 provides the opportunity to cause the pool property to be a huge asset to the Oxbow. The current alternative to that is a massive development project that will add more stressors to the Oxbow from about 4 different directions. I am reminded of the test given by the elders to a group of young folks being initiated into responsible adulthood. The elders placed a young bird into the hands of each initiate, and they were told to enclose the biddies with both hands. The head elder then said, "You have a choice of how to use your spirit and your power. You can close your hands so tightly that you kill the young life you hold, or you can hold it loosely and carry it to food and water. This LUPS and the council hold the future health and existence of the Oxbow in your hands. I truly wish you well in your decision-making. The well-being of our city and a whole lot of some of God's pretty neat creatures are at stake. Thanks for your time and attention. I sit for any questions you may have."
Thank you, Mr. Regan. Our next speaker is Dr. Joe Valles, followed by Renee Horvath. Dr. Valles, please unmute yourself. Feel free to turn your video, and your 1.5 minutes will begin, or excuse me, your 2 minutes will begin when you start speaking. Dr. Valles, are you there? Madam Chair, I think we'll maybe move on to Ms. Renee Horvath and then come back to Dr. Joe Valles. Ms. Horvath, please feel free to turn on your video, unmute yourself, and your 2 minutes will begin when you start speaking.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. I want to thank you all for participating in this great opportunity to acquire a really unique feature of Albuquerque. A lot of people don't realize that we even had this marshland, this wetlands. And I was just speaking Parks and Rec superintendent who said this is like the only significant wetlands along the whole Rio Grande within the city limits. He had always expected that this would be preserved. And he knew the pools, and he knew that the goal was always to preserve and protect this property because it is like, it can buffer this really unique resource that we have. And the first time I've seen this place was back in the 80s. I was shocked to see it. And I was shocked to see how much wildlife we had there. It is a wetlands along the Rio Grande. It has a huge concentration of wildlife, especially waterfowl that migrates in the area. And it's extremely sensitive. It's a great resource, not only for the West Side, but for all of Albuquerque. And that's what makes Albuquerque great, is that we have these wonderful natural features. And this, a lot of times people from out of state want me to take them to our unique areas. And one of them is this wetland. So I do appreciate that the Open Space Advisory Board has voted to put this on the priority list. It does meet all of the criteria to do so because of its historic significance, its scenic value, it protects even the public from some of the natural hazards that we've had along the Rio Grande. We've had wildfires and that have burned down structures along the Rio Grande. This will provide a nice buffer for the residents and for the wildlife. And
thank you, Ms. Horvath. Your 2 minutes are up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Barbara Taylor, and be followed by Peggy Neff. Ms. Taylor, feel free to turn on your video, unmute yourself, and your 2 minutes will begin when you start speaking.
There we go. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Madam President, members of the committee. I'm here on behalf of Twyla McComb, who is the chair of the Open Space Advisory Board, and we really appreciate the opportunity to provide input on this legislation. Because 134, well, let me just say up front, ad lib, everybody wants this property. There's no resistance to acquiring this property. Because R134 was introduced only a week ago and the board didn't get a chance to see the bill in advance, and because we as a board haven't had a chance to meet, I am not representing an approved position of the board. However, the inclusion of the pool property was discussed at length at our last meeting, and I would like to provide you with some additional information that was not provided at your full council meeting. The pool property came to the attention of the board a couple of years ago at the beginning of the development process. And at that time, the board voted not to support the development of this one-of-a-kind property. The property meets all the criteria for inclusion on the priority acquisition list and is exactly the kind of property we would like to have for major public open space. So when the subject came up again at our January 25th meeting, the board happily and unanimously voted to include it on the priority acquisition list, but we did have some discussion. In closed session, staff provided us with details of the planned acquisition, including the fact that the department does not have enough money to complete the sale. That fact led, of course, inevitably to a discussion of the trust fund. And as you all probably know by now, Ordinance 15-48, enactment 2015-028 states in one place that the principle of the Open Space Trust Fund shall be maintained intact, and in another that the trust fund shall be permanent and irrevocable. In view of this legal impediment, the board, in an effort to be constructive, took two steps. First, we approved a motion recommending that the city of Albuquerque negotiate with the seller for a phased payment option that will give the city and Open Space Advisory Board time to consider all funding sources. The obvious idea was—
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Your 2 minutes are up.
And Mr. Moya, since we've already set a precedent by allowing another speaker to go a little longer, Ms. Taylor, would you be able to handle this in one more minute?
I think so.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moya, for indulging me.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Second, we scheduled a special meeting of the board for February 18th so that all members of the board could have a focused discussion on what our 2021 recommendation would be with respect to the future of the trust fund. And I won't belabor the point, but there are two ordinances that give the board the duty, that's the language in the ordinance, to quote, review and provide comments to the mayor and city council and to the treasurer or his designee. We have written this letter, which enables the liquidation of $2.2 million from the Open Space Trust Fund, to ask that you defer until after February 18th so that the board can make a recommendation. Failing that, we would ask that you amend Section 2 out of the bill, which is in direct conflict with current law. We don't have any argument over the desirability of acquiring the property. None. So we are more than ready to work with you constructively to acquire this property. And thank you so much for giving me the additional time.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Councilor Gibson, do you have a question?
Yeah, actually, it's a follow-up, a comment to Ms. Taylor's remarks. We talked about the special meeting that the board will be having next week on the 18th. And so glad to know that, because we won't be able to hear this until the following meeting, which would be on March 1st. So during that time, I think it is important, as you noted, that the obligations and the responsibilities of the Open Space Advisory Board be honored, and that we do receive your review and your advice on this property. And so I appreciate you being here and making your comments. Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Gibson. Mr. Moya?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our next speaker is Peggy Neff, followed by Dr. Joe Valles. Ms. Neff, please feel free to turn on your video and unmute yourself, and your 2 minutes will begin when you start speaking.
Good afternoon. I keep my video off in order to remind us all that there are many, many people in the community that cannot afford to join us today. So I'm just reading from what I have sent already to you, and you have it. If you have any additional questions, please, I can address them. LUPS committee chair and committee members, discourse and debate are essential to the well-being of our community and the future of democratic societies. To that end, I am happy to contribute my support and suggestions in this forum for moving forward to secure and protect what is known in our city as the pool property. I urge your support for prioritizing the purchase of the pool property and for finding funding, either using open space trust funds or other monies that are available and can be made available. This magnificent opportunity would not have been possible without concerned community members and sincere leadership, city leadership, jumping into the front line to defend against overzealous developers. For this, I raise a loud shout of support. Thank you to Mayor Keller, to the CABQ Park and Recs folks, to the Open Space Department, and to the many steadfast and committed members of our community who continue to pursue your support. Working from different perspectives, we have found our common collective will to save this rare resource. At previous public forums and in open meetings, a clear community position has been verbalized regarding visions for the pool property. While we must secure this site as a primary protection for the San Antonio Oxbow and Overlook, Any future developments on this site would work best as dedicated to environmental and conservation education with minimal development of this acreage. As we continue to both learn and document the unique history and the environmental significance and the potentials for this site, we find ourselves at a fortuitous juncture in time. We can and should make great efforts to develop this site as a world-class, sustainable, environmentally forward endeavor. To this end, I would suggest a recommendation. Please, committee members, if you can consider requesting city leadership to immediately engage in the pursuit of a memorandum of understanding with state and federal and private agencies to work towards getting the pool property into the Rio Grande Valley State Park. Using that process to pledge a reimbursement of the open space trust funds, this would be a great step forward. Community members see that the
Thank you,
Rio
Ms.
Grande
Neff.
Valley
Your
State
time
Park.
is up. Thank you, Ms. Neff.
Right.
Our next speaker is Dr. Joe Valles, followed by Kathy Adams. Dr. Valles, please feel free to turn on your video and unmute yourself, and your 2 minutes will begin when you start speaking.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Please proceed.
Okay, good. Just some brief comments I want to make. Some of them I've already made to the Open Space Advisory Board and to the Government Operations and Finance. I'm president of the Grande Heights Neighborhood Association. We have our boundaries on the Western Bosque and the Bluff, and we're just south of the respected property called the pool property. I also serve on the Executive Council of the West Side Coalition of Neighborhood Associations and chair the Intercoalition Panel of Neighborhood Coalitions throughout the city. All these associations and other institutions and numerous residents throughout the city have been consistent in their support to purchase, preserve, and protect this precious property immediately adjacent to the Oxbow Preserve for the enjoyment of generations to come. Now, I want to make a comment I didn't make then, but I'll make it here. This property happens to be located on the west side, but it's not just a west side issue. Its preservation as a sensitive land is important to the entire city and county, and indeed the state of New Mexico. We don't have a lot of these kinds of lands left. The Open Space Advisory Board added this property to its priority acquisition list by a 5-0 vote. The City Council Government Operations and Finance Committee passed it onto City Council on a 5-0 vote. And so we urge you in the strongest of terms to help acquire the pool property using funds from the Open Space Trust Fund, in addition to the legislative outlay funding available of $4.5 million. I would just say that, think about this. Right across from this land is the Rio Grande Nature Center and the Bosque. And this is just, it's just something that should happen. And then we have the Volcano Cliffs, you know, that park. So I just urge you to do the right thing. And I also thank you for entertaining me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Valles. Our next speaker is Kathy Adams, followed by Christy Lawrence. Ms. Adams, you look ready to go. Your 2.5 minutes will begin when you start speaking.
Thank you so much to all of you for giving us the opportunity to speak today. I am speaking on behalf of the West Side Coalition of Neighborhood Associations, but I really believe that I'm speaking on the behalf of all Albuquerqueans. This is an opportunity not to be missed. This is an opportunity for Albuquerque to really demonstrate its standing in the state and in the world. The pool property has become well known as a jewel in New Mexico, the jewel of New Mexico. You are all well aware of the importance of the Oxbow. It is unique, and it has become very well known throughout the Albuquerque community, the state of New Mexico, and it is recognized at the national level at this point. I'm truly not sure exactly why we are here today at LUPS, but I am, and all the visitors are very interested in hearing your discussion and hearing what you have to say. We hope to hear that you are committed at all costs to honoring the widespread support in favor of the acquisition of this property. I say that New Mexico has been historically, can continue to be, and should continue to be a leader in conservation efforts. I truly believe that people come to our state because of the natural beauty and the wildlife diversity. Albuquerque can only benefit from the purchase of this property. And I just want to say, make it happen. We're trusting you on this. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Our next speaker is Christy Lawrence, followed by Jim Walker. Ms. Lawrence, feel free to turn on your video and unmute yourself, and your 2 minutes will begin when you start speaking.
Hi, can you see me?
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. Hello, honorable counselors. My name is Christy Lawrence, and I am president of the Albuquerque West Side Business Association. And I also represent the Oxbow Park neighborhood for the West Side Coalition of Neighborhood Associations. And if any of you have ever seen a flock of sandhill cranes approach our city from the west or the east, glide over your head and descend down to the bosque, then you know what a thrilling experience that is. I have been blessed to witness this numerous times, and oftentimes those sandhill cranes are landing at the pool property. It is one of their preferred stops along their migration route. And sandhill cranes, as has been noted previously, are just one of the many species that are vulnerable and live or take refuge at the pool property. It is really an oasis of nature in an area where houses are closing in. So on behalf of the Albuquerque West Side Business Association and the residents of Oxbow Park, we ask that you please do move forward with the city's purchase of the pool property to be used as open space. And protecting this land is not critical just because of the species that live and migrate there. It also is valuable to protect our valuable water. And we have invested, the state has invested more than $4 million already in funds for this purchase. It's my understanding that if we do not use that money to buy this property, that we have to give it back. If we have to do that, I feel that it would really be a huge missed opportunity and an embarrassment to the city. And I believe and fear that it could make state lawmakers less inclined to give our city money for projects of any type in the future, which I know all of you are certainly aware that we can't afford to have that happen. The fund that we have that is specifically for the purchase of land for open space is such a blessing. That is what the money is there for. And from the Finance Committee meeting the other day, my understanding is that it has almost $12 million in it, not including any sort of interest. So there's no point in having a fund like that if we don't use some of it for purchasing a land like the pool property. And that money is there for such a time as this. Since time is critical.
Thank you, Ms. Lawrence. Your time is up.
Thank you so much. Please move forward.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jim Walker. Mr. Walker, feel free to turn your video back on. Go ahead and unmute yourself, and your 2 minutes will begin when you start speaking.
Hi, I'm Jim Walker. I'm with the Archaeological Conservancy, and I'm here to speak about the probable acquisition of Pueblo Calabasas. This is a very important archaeological site, one of the most important that still remain on private land in Bernalillo County. And we strongly support the acquisition of this half-acre. It's what's left of one of the 12 Tehuash province pueblos that were in the valley when Coronado and his men arrived in 1540. Our first foreign visitors. And so we have been tracking this particular property for quite some time. A portion of it is already preserved, and the half acre is what is left. And so we urge you to go ahead and acquire this. We feel that it's very important. It's important to the archaeological community, and it's also important to the Tehuash speakers in the Middle Rio Grande Valley. So just speaking in favor of acquisition of Pueblos Calabasias. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Madam Chair, that concludes public comments.
Thank you, Mr. Moya. And with that, it is time to move on. And Councilor Borrego, since you're a member of this committee, would you like to move agenda item AR 134?
I would. Thank you very much, Counselor. I would like to move the item that you mentioned. Thank you. I would be my honor.
Thank you, Councilor Borrego. And I would like to move this without recommendation. Councilors, are there any questions for staff or the administration? Seeing none, are there any comments? With that, I think this meeting has.
Counselor, I would like to move also for immediate action on this particular item.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
this is Isaac Padilla. I spoke to legal and legal said as long as it's reported out on the 17th and it goes for final action on the 1st, that immediate action wouldn't be necessary. So
Then I will withdraw that at this time, if that's the case.
Thank you, Isaac. Thank you, Councilor Borrego. Councilor Benton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to move an amendment, committee amendment. This would be committee amendment number 1. And what this does is, as I think,
Should we see if we can get a second on that?
yeah.
Okay. I'll second that. Go ahead, Councilor Benton. That's been moved and seconded.
Thank you. Yeah, this would be committee amendment number 1. It's the only amendment that I know of for this bill. And this is addressing some of the things that Ms. Taylor mentioned in her comments, which is until such time as the council and the administration agree to amend the open space ordinances, we cannot dig, contrary to some thinking and statements that have been made, we cannot dig into the corpus of the open space fund, that is supposed to be maintained in perpetuity, and that of course it generates some income that can be used, and certainly is open, and I'm open to any discussions about amending that in the future. But in the meanwhile, this bill, I'll go ahead and read it. I'll read the explanation of the of this that was provided by staff. Let me try to read this from my hard copy, which I'll be able to do better than the screen. But on page 1, line 18, amend the text as follows. R 2016 is hereby amended to read as follows. Strike lines 8 through 12 on page 2, replace with the new section 2, 3, and 4 as follows. Section 2, pool property acquisition. The council hereby approves up to $2.2 million for the purchase of the pool property. These funds may be used from the General Fund 110 or from other appropriate and lawful sources as identified by the administration. The funds authorized by this section may not be used to acquire any open space other than the pool property. Section 3, council approval of the purchase. Purchase of the pool property shall not be final until approved by the city council through an executive communication that outlines all funding sources used for the purchase. Just for the record, we'll have a discussion. I do want to amend the amendment with regard to that section. Section 4, what this does is reinsert, because the priority list of open space lands, which is what this bill is amending, along with providing for approval of funding for the purposes of the pool property, it's amending the priorities of the open space list to add the pool property. So this would still do that, but by completely replacing the old list, it would otherwise be removing these provisions. And that's what's in section 4, special provisions for the northern sand dunes and North Rio Puerco escarpment. We put the language back in from the original list that had been passed in 2016 with regard to special procedures for those purchases. And then on section 5, similarly, there were special prioritizations made within the priorities list for the Volcano Cliff Sector Development Plan parcels and the Northern Geological Window parcels. And we're now adding the pool property through section 5. So it's restoring existing policies that were passed by the council and by the Open Space Advisory Board back in 2016, maintaining those, because there's been no discussion by the Open Space Board or the council or anyone to remove those special provisions. I could ask perhaps Ms. Schultz to add anything that I've left out of that. And then I want to have a discussion with the administration staff present with regard to section 3, which would have required an EC. And I'm prepared to remove that after we have that discussion.
Thank you, Councilor Benton. Ms. Schultz?
Madam Chair, Councilor Benton, thank you. I don't have anything additional. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Councilor Gibson, do you have a question before we go?
No, I'd like to hear what Ms. Schultz has to say, but
I also have a question. I had my hand up.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you. If you would all use your, Councilor Borrego, you did use your raised hand sign. I'll pay attention. Councilor Borrego, do you have questions?
Well, and Shanna may end up addressing this, but I wanted to know exactly where we're pulling the funds from, because I think there might need to be an amendment. And you mentioned it, Councilor Benton, to section 3. So I thought maybe Ms. Yara might want to address that.
Madam Chair, Councilor Borrego, this amendment doesn't specify exactly where that up to that 2.2 million figure will come from. It specifies the administration may seek it from any lawful source they desire, which at this point would not include the Open Space Trust Fund for up to that 2.2 million figure, because that much money is not available from that trust fund. But the amendment does not get more specific beyond the administration is authorized to find it.
Ms. Yara, could you address that?
Go ahead, Ms. Yara.
Yes, Madam Chair and councilors. So I have been in communication with the administration about other sources of funding beyond the trust fund. Of course, you all realize that would require an amendment to the ordinance, which might not fit within this timeline. So we have identified some other sources of funding that would come from the capital plan. Some of it is related to some old economic development money from 2011, some existing open space funds from impact fees, the interest that's generated by the trust, and of course our 2% for open space does still have some balance in there from the 2019 program. And then there's another source of funding from lodgers tax that we're looking at for balloon landing sites, because of this property would be really available for balloons to land. So that would make up, if we could actually find just another small amount from either councilor set-asides or some other source like the general fund, we could make up the $2.2 million that's been requested. So. We do have a draft of that amendment. I'm sorry it wasn't ready to share with you all today.
Thank you, Ms. Yara. And Councillor Gibson, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. So actually a couple of questions. So do we have an agreement on the sale of this? Where are we on that? Has there been negotiations? Is there a selling price established?
Madam Chair, Councilor Gibson, I would defer to the administration to answer some of those questions. Council and council staff haven't had any direct communications on those negotiations with the property owner, so the administration may be able to more accurately answer that question for you.
Administration, does anyone want to address that? Stephanie, would that be you? Or would it be perhaps Mr. Brielle?
Good afternoon, councilors. This is I'm in the mayor's conference room. Let me start by just giving you a little bit of the conversations that have been transpiring to give you a complete picture of where we are. We have entered into an agreement with the property owner. The agreement that we have is a sale price of $6.7 million for the 23 acres. He has signed the agreement. We have negotiated a closing date of March the 19th. The funds that we are looking to use to purchase this property are the $4.5 million of state monies that were appropriated by the legislature over a year ago that you all have already approved and appropriated. Ms. Yara and I have had conversations over the last couple of days, working on bridging the gap. We are short about 2.2 million. We have looked at the funding sources that she just conveyed to all of you. We believe that we will have all of them in place for you, and we're working on an amendment for the full council so that you all can rest assured that our interest is not to take the money from the Open Space Trust Fund, realizing how important that is, not only to the Open Space Advisory Board, but to many of you. And so we will present an amendment to that will delineate the funds for where they're being taken from, and to close this deal and secure this space, or this open space, for the public. I had asked Councillor Benton earlier if you would consider removing the section that requires an EC, simply because the amendment that you will have at the full council before you make a final determination will specify the funding sources and will not be using, again, the trust fund. And the reason for taking that section out, if I might, members of the committee, is simply because when we go through that process, then that bill will have to be up for immediate action. It becomes a more, if you will, legislative procedural kind of conversation, as opposed to solving the issue. And I have heard from many of you in the council that you all were not interested in looking at the trust fund. And so we're working on a way to make this happen without tapping into that fund. And so these conversations, just so that many of you will know, when the state appropriated the money, they asked us to do to meet with the owners, et cetera. I sent the owners a letter back right before the holidays, asking him if he would be interested in solving this issue for the good of the entire city. He met with me. We negotiated, and that's what's before you today. So just want to make sure you all know this hasn't been going on for 7 or 8 months. This was really in the last 3 or 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks into the start of the new year. So I just want you to know that I think we have an opportunity here to do something really special for the community. I also would add that the owner did tell me that he was going to work with his developer, and that he would basically indemnify the city from any liability associated with his relationship with the developer and that was his responsibility, and that he would take care of that as part of our deal in closing this and making this happen. So our city attorney, Alan Varela, has been working with his counsel, and that's where we are today. And so again, I would ask if you all would give us the opportunity to submit that amendment to you at the full council. I think it's a great way to move forward and finally do something that's great for the, not finally, just do something that's great for the city. So I'll stand for any questions.
So, Mr. Rael, you answered my question in the very first sentence. Yes, we do have an agreement. So thanks for everything else. Thanks for everything else. That's fine. And I, you know, the issue with the trust fund was not the trust fund itself, but the corpus. And that, I think that's what my concern, and other people I've heard that talk about that. So okay, so we have an agreement, and I'm glad to know that. Thank you. And you know what? I wouldn't have even brought this up, but the conversation was already there, so I thought we should at least know if there has been agreement, so we know about what we're going to be paying for, or paying on this. Thank you,
Councilor Gibson. Thank you, Councilor Gibson. And Councilor Benton, you
Madam
still.
Chair, yeah. If we could just have Shanna finish with any further comments she has before we start with additional questions. And I just wanted to, I should have made clear at the beginning, look, this amendment is in complete support of the purchase, and just trying to clean up, some of the details with regard to being deliberate about any changes to the priorities list or for existing provisions which are in place, and not having those fall by the wayside because we're focused right now on the pool property. But I'd just like to hear Shanna finish her or begin her staff comments, if any other points that I may have failed to mention.
Thank you.
Madam Chair and Councilor Benton, I was just going to say I didn't have anything additional to add regarding your amendment beyond what you already explained. I'd be happy to go into more detail about the amendments to the amendments that you are getting ready to pose. But I would also like to offer to the committee that there are 2 other properties we're considering as a part of this resolution. And if there are questions about those other 2 properties, I can also discuss those with you as well. That's all I have for now, though. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Schultz. And Councilor Senya, I see that you have as you are not officially a member of this committee, so I'm going to let Councilor Borrego go first, and then as a courtesy, we will allow you to speak when all of the committee members have spoken. Is that all right?
Actually, Councilor, I'd like to hear Councilor Sena, and I see that Alan Varela, the attorney, also had his hand up, but I do have some comments.
Go right ahead, Councilor Borrego. You have the floor.
I'd actually like to hear Councilor Sena first.
Councilor Sena, since you are, we would like to have you wrap this up in about 2 minutes, if at all, or 2.5 minutes, if at all possible.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate you for allowing me to come to this committee and address the committee, even though I'm not a member. Really, it's just to, I support overall the amendments minus section 3, and just thinking about the timeline and the process. As Ms. Yara was stating, that we actually did want to have an amendment come to full council to really address some of the language that a lot of the other councilors and some community members had in addressing the Open Space Trust Fund. But we just didn't want to bring that since it was going to 2 committees. So we were planning on bringing that to full council, but if we can really think about the timeline on this, and I'd love to hear from our city attorney, Mr. Varela. But overall, I'm in support of the amendment as long as we take out that section 3 that would push us back a little bit. And that's pretty much all that I have. And thank you again for your support in acquiring the pool property, as it is really essential for the refuge of our community and our wildlife. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Sena, and Councilor Borrego, you have the floor now.
Madam Chair, can we hear from our city attorney?
Absolutely. Good evening, Mr. Varela.
Good evening, Madam Chair, councilors. Thank you very much. I agree with everything that's been said today. I do, as the attorney involved with the technical legal terminology discussions with the seller's attorney, need to just clarify one word that Mr. Rael used. He said that the seller agreed to indemnify the city, and what the seller has agreed to do is to obtain the seller is certainly taking care of the developer. He has agreed to obtain a waiver from the developer, stating that the developer will not have any actions against the city regarding the soon-to-be prior contract that was in place. But to use the word indemnification would be an unacceptable use of a technical legal term that the seller has specifically barred us from using. But that is all. Thank you, though.
Thank you, Mr. Varela. Councilor Borrego, it is still back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to mention that I would like to second Councilor Benton's amendment with the removal of Section 3, if he would agree to that. I know he mentioned something earlier. So, I mean, given what Councilor Sena advised, I think the timing issue is really important regarding this property. And, you know, I actually was in the planning department when the Oxbow property came through, and I remember how delicate that property, the development was for that particular area. And, you know, I see this as one of our last riparian wetlands for the city, for open space that's adjacent to the river. I think its significance is extremely important to the city of Albuquerque. And I actually compare this a little bit to the Elena Gallegos property when we purchased that property some time ago, and how that has become really an educational, significant property, and our trails and linkages and so on. So I just would ask that Councilor Benton consider removing that one section.
Thank you. Councilor Benton?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, President Borrego. I'll move amend the amendment motion, which is fairly simple. It includes what we referred to of removing Section 3, but it also has a technical correction as to a reference of one of the previous existing bills that govern. So I move to amend the committee amendment 1 in the following 2 ways. On page 1, line 18, amend the text to reference R 2016-12, not R 2016-16 as the amendment currently reads. So that's a correction within my own amendment. And then number 2, strike Section 3 in total and renumber the subsequent sections.
Thank you, Councilor Benton. Is there a second for that?
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Borrego. Are there any other comments? There's a motion and a second. We are going to call for a vote if there are no other comments. And the motion on the floor is to move without recommendation and as amended.
Point of order, Madam Chair. I think the first vote would just be on this amendment to the amendment, because what was distributed to the committee is what we're amending right now, and then we'll vote on the actual amendment.
Thank you, Councilor. I'm having a hard time following it because I only have Zoom tonight. So, thank you. We will vote on this as amended, the amendment as amended.
Councilor Jones?
Yes.
Councilor Benton?
Yes.
Councilor Borrego?
Yes.
Councilor Gibson?
Yes.
And Councilor Pena?
Yes.
And that passes on a 5-0 vote.
Thank you. I think now we are going to the move without recommendation as amended. And all those in favor? Oh, wait, let's take a roll call. Do we need to have a second on that again?
think you seconded it in the
I
first
thought we
place.
did have a second.
Okay,
Yeah.
so as long as we're okay with this, thank you, Chris. Then let's call the roll, please.
Perfect. Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Borrego,
Yes.
Counselor Gibson,
Yes.
and Counselor Pena.
Yes.
And that passes on a 5-0 vote.
Thank you. That concludes our business for this evening. So meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Counselor.
Madam Chair.